Have you ever had a pimple stuck between your butt cheek? Because I know I have. But you know who hasn't? James Lee. The man that wiped all of Generation Zero without effort either. Now, let's get into it. Across Korea, every region always had one legend that ruled the region. And one by one, they all got taken out by James Lee, of course. Now, before we get to James Lee, these kings were known as the Generation 1. Now, I'm not going to list down every single king in these regions, but I'll show you the images right here. Basically, these kings ruled a section of Korea, like Seoul, Busan, and even Incheon. They were basically the strongest kings. Until James Lee showed up, and one by one, he made them their bitch. James Lee was always alone. He never had a crew or an army or even any territory. But his reputation existed way before he did. People already knew who James Lee was at the time, because the kings ended up fighting him, and they lost. The scary thing about James Lee is that when he showed up, he didn't just become a king. He didn't just take their place when he beat them. All he did was walk away. The biggest mystery about James Lee at the time was that no one knew who he was. He just showed up out of nowhere. After Generation 1 collapsed, the kings became old legends. The world moved into the Generation 2. But the fear still remained, because everyone knew, before the new monsters appeared, there was only one person who had already defeated the monsters of the past. James Lee wasn't the king of Generation 1. He was the reason the Generation 1 ended in the start. At the time, every king always mentioned James Lee, and it was out of fear as well. Imagine being so scary that your name gives PTSD. Anyways, at the time, the kings battled to have their own places. James Lee, on the other hand, didn't give a shit. He wasn't trying to become another king, he was trying to erase them. Everyone was trying to play Monopoly, and James Lee just flipped it around. The thing about James Lee was that when it came to characters like Gun Park, we knew that he loved to fight. Characters like Tae-soo, he had pride. James Lee, what the fuck do we know about him? Nothing. He just showed up with final boss energy. Now, the fall of the Generation 1 wasn't much of a big battle. It was a very slow burn collapse. He showed up, beat them one by one throughout the series. They weren't just fighting another king, they were fighting the end of their era. Imagine getting defeated so hard and then you find out that you weren't even the final boss. You were just part of the tutorial. Now, why James Lee became a legend in the first place, it wasn't solely because he won the fights, it was because of how he won. He didn't just replace the kings, he didn't sit on their thrones either. He, as I mentioned, he ended up just leaving, walking away. That made him terrifying. Made him gain my respect, even though he already had it. Now, at the time, before we knew that James Lee was Diego King, Tae-soo Ma was one of the characters, and important characters, that was slowly being built up as a powerful king. We'd never actually seen him fight, but we were led to believe that he was insanely powerful, which he is. It's just unfortunate that when James Lee showed up, well, I don't really need to explain, I'll just show you. The key takeaway about the kings is that they had pride and, most importantly, aura, which they earned without a doubt, before it got taken away by James Lee. Now, when James Lee beat off the kings, hold up, pause. When James Lee beat the kings one by one, that wasn't actually the first time they encountered him, of course. You see, if we go back in time, in the Sung Ji-hyuk arc, the first time all the kings fight James Lee, it was all together. When Sung Ji-hyuk appeared in this arc, that was the first time we ever saw James Lee get pushed. What I mean by that is, Sung Ji-hyuk wasn't just any other opponent. He was one of the few people in the Generation 1 who actually stood up against James Lee and managed to force James Lee to take the fight serious. This fight is important. It showed us because James Lee wasn't feared because of his exaggerated legend. He was feared because he was the strongest fighter that everyone struggled to keep up with. At this stage, James Lee had everything. He had speed, skill, intelligence, adaptability, and most importantly, his handsome, sexy K-pop idol look. Now, obviously, he managed to escape the Generation 1. He did fight them a little bit, but mainly avoided them. Obviously, before them, he fought Sungjuk, which in that moment, he became so much stronger. Now, skip forward into the future. We're at the stage where Ji Chen-kwok is the king of Seoul. Well, he was until he got slaughtered, manhandled by this handsome guy. Now, coming back to the present timeline where we are now, this is where later on, James Lee went to all the kings and beat them one by one. In the current present timeline of the story, the Generation 1 is kind of a thing in the past. But the legend and name of James Lee is something that still lingers into the present, something that gets talked about even though the generation got ended about a year ago. Now, with everything happening in the story of Lookism, you have monsters like Tom Lee, Gun Park, Gu Kim, and other strong fighters in the current era that continue to stand in the main event surrounding James Lee. Now, when James Lee speaks, everyone listens. He's always the focus of attention when he's on camera. And when he gets involved, power scale changes. The reason why everyone fears James Lee isn't because he's the strongest, it's because he's always one step ahead. Everything that happens in Lookism always has a plan to it. With everything that's happening, we know that the coming conflict is James Lee. All the kings ended up getting involved and defeated when James Lee was taking charge. Before him, it was Charles Choi. Now, at the time, Generation 1 feared him because he ended the whole era. In the current generation, everyone fears him because they know he's the final obstacle standing in their way. If James Lee wins, then they're done. They can't do anything to beat him.